We'll take questions as we maybe halfway through and stuff like that. So, what were some of the problems that we were having before we start reading this in general that led to the idea that, hey, we need to look at our nuisance statute and find a way to either change it, tweak it, make it more enforceable? Kind of just for our record, what were some of the things the city ran into? I mean, without naming names, but just in general, you know.
The main issue was the lack of good language for the due process for the residents to be able to go through an appeal process if they don't agree with a decision that the city made against their property.
And where did we learn that was a problem? Who criticized us for that?
Overall, when I started working and enforcing the code for property maintenance and zoning regulations, I started looking through our city ordinances and basically noticed some of the language was not kind of put together very well.
Was there any cases that went to any sort of governmental agency or board or court in which an administrator, a magistrate, or a judge said that we lacked due process, or is it something we just anticipated might happen?
Well, I went only for one case to court for Diane property, which you all are familiar with as far as I know. And the magistrate sent us back probably 4 times, in which it expanded the process of running back and forth for like 9 months, as the courts kept on claiming that we need to better service the resident, we need to better put the language together for the letters that we sent out to notify them properly. So that's kind of how it came about.
Okay, so the criticism was maybe our statutory language wasn't clear enough for the magistrate to apply the law, and
Yes.
they felt that the citizen might have had a harder time of understanding where they went afoul of the law.
Steve, it is my understanding also that a lot of this came to be in Andre working with our law department in various elements of the enforcement process. And it was the law department that said, well, hey, we need to clean this up and add due process in existing provisions where our due process is either non-existent or needs to be brought into the present day. And so this whole nuisance ordinance, properties ordinance before you was undertaken primarily at the recommendation of the assistant law director, and that was to add the due process, clarify and add due process provisions where they were previously lacking.
Okay. Now, looking at the statute itself, for anybody who's following along, I'm looking at T7612 for the record. It's at the top, it gives the title heading, and it says, whereas the mayor recommends re-examining Chapter 531 of the codified ordinances as followed, new text underlined, deleted text a strike through. So if you're looking along out there, the suggested new language will be just underlined, and what the current law is the stuff that has a line drawn through it. So where it's a line drawn through, we're eliminating that language, and the line underlined is what we've been suggested that the city's put together for council's review to be the new language on those. So with that, I'm going to start with the definitions. For purposes of this chapter, the following definition shall apply unless the context clearly indicates or requires a different meaning. The old law used to say authorized private receptacle means a litter, storage, and collection receptacle is required and authorized in the city by Chapter 941. Is that mean a trash can? Would that be fair to say? Is that a trash can probably?
So, Mr. Mishniak, if I could also clarify for the benefit of council, you'll notice at the top under chapter, this used to be the litter chapter, and it was revised and renamed nuisance properties, and so there are
Yeah, good point.
provisions that address various elements. So you're probably seeing the authorized private receptacle as a holdover from the old litter chapter.
Well, is that,
And
let me ask you this, is 531 currently entitled litter, or is it not?
It is currently entitled litter and litter only, correct?
Okay, and that line, authorized private receptacle means a litter store, that's the current law in Streetsboro.
That is correct.
Then the underlying material that follows that I'll read now says building materials means lumber, drywall, plywood, brick, and concrete masonry units, stone roofing, siding, flooring, materials, insulation, pipe, wire, bulk materials used in construction, such as drywall, compound, concrete, sand, gravel, aggregate, asphalt, and cement. So they replace what I'm calling is basically a trash can, and we're starting by defining the word building materials, and I'm assuming that word will be repeated throughout somewhere in this statute below, and it gives its meaning in that first line, so we understand that. Director means the Director of Public Safety.
Service.
I'm sorry, Director of Public Service. All right. C, building parts means doors, windows, plumbing fixtures, cabinets, light fixtures, and heating, ventilation, and air conditioning equipment. These are all lines that aren't erasing anything. These are new lines that we're adding. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, if I could further
Yeah.
clarify my comment. So this started as the litter chapter, and it's being revised to address nuisance properties, of which litter is one element of it.
Gotcha.
And so this is sort of a conglomeration of various existing provisions into one spot, all of which addresses nuisances, and adds, if you look at the latter sections, 03, 04, 05, and 06, those are sort of the due process, how to serve, how many days, what does a notice of violation include. Those are the due process centric or due process related provisions that were the primary reason for this undertaking.
Okay. Item D, which they're scratching out B, creates a definition for the word garbage, and it means discarded matter, substance, or waste resulting from the growing, handling, storage, preparation, cooking, selling, serving, and/or consumption of food, including animal products, fowl, fish, fruits, and vegetables, grains, legumes, and condiments, as well as contaminated containers used to prepare, serve, or sell such matter. E, household appliance and equipment means refrigerators, ranges, microwave ovens, dishwashers, clothes washers, dryers, and other built-in and countertop appliances, and audio-visual equipment. Would that, do you know if that includes computers? Do you know? Audio-visual equipment? I'm just thinking in terms of trash, you know.
I don't think so. That probably would fall under electronics, not appliances.
All right, F, motor vehicle includes those defined in the ORC under 450101B, as well as recreational vehicles as defined in Ohio Revised Code Section 450101Q, motorcycles as defined in Ohio Revised Code Section 450101ZZ, and mini trucks as defined in Ohio Revised Code Section 4501BBB. So it gives us, basically so far it's defining some things. It's defining building materials, director, building parts, household appliances and equipment, and then the word motor vehicle. So we're getting these definitions because there's going to be some language later saying what folks can do with that. G then defines the word refuse, R-E-F-U-S-E, and replaces the word litter It means garbage, takes the word refuse out, and rubbish, as defined herein, and all other waste material, including appliances, used or discarded building materials. See, there's that word, and we defined it up top. Takes out the words roofing material, used or discarded siding material, inserts used or discarded building parts. So now we have item C being cited to. Takes out the words lumber, broken concrete, asphalt, bricks, drywall, unauthorized signs within city right away. Leaves in tree and shrub stumps, limbs, clippings, branches, and other waste building materials. And then takes out which is thrown or stored or deposited as herein prohibited. For purposes of this chapter, safety and welfare, litter, takes all that language out. And jumps down to the word shall not include leaves placed adjacent to the right-of-way in compliance with the city leaf program. And then H, person means any individual, firm, partnership, association, corporation, limited liability company, or organization of any kind. So we now get a definition for person and refuse. Going to the second page. There's a definition of private premise or premises, and it takes that out and replaces it with the following definition of parcel of land. Parcel of land means any parcel of real property recognized by the Portage County Auditor for tax or assessment purposes, even if tax exempt, but does not include publicly owned parcels, the public right-of-way, or dedicated public ground. So we now have a new definition that was no longer there. We take out private premises completely. J is the definition. We get a new word for owner, and that defines an owner as the person, corporation, partnership, limited liability company, or other entity identified on the tax duplicate of the Portage County Auditor as the record title owner of a parcel of land coming in with the purview of this chapter. So if you're on the tax documents, I guess you will be the owner. You'll be looked at as the owner of a parcel of land. The definition of refuse in F is being completely taken out. K is, there used to be G, is now K. Rubbish means I'm not going to be able to say that. Anybody want to try that one?
Putrescible.
Putrescible, very good. Solid waste consisting of both combustible and non-combustible waste, such as paper, including newsprint, magazines, paperback books, paperboard, plastic, polystyrene, and other packaging materials and containers, cardboard and cardboard boxes, metal, plastic, and glass containers, yard waste, wood, glass textiles, clothing, mattresses, bedding, carpet, drapery, crockery, and other similar materials. Takes out the word wrappings and cigarettes. So we now have another definition, rubbish. Then litter is redefined under L, it's moved from its earlier spot, and it means uncontained rubbish, including prepared food and drink containers that may be carried, scattered, or dispersed by normal wind conditions. And a definition of long-term under M is new. For the purposes of this chapter, which is 53102, long-term means more than 1 year. The time is measured from the commencement of any outdoor storage, notwithstanding that some materials may have been stored for less than 1 year. Help me out with that one. What are they meaning there that means more than 1 year, but the time is measured from commencement of any outdoor storage, notwithstanding that some of the materials might be there? So what they're saying is from the first time you store something, the clock starts ticking? Is that how I'm reading that? So give me an example. Like what would you have some what are our definitions? Rubbish owner. So you have some rubbish on a parcel of land, your clock starts ticking, and then you move in a bunch of other junk 2 weeks before
Time doesn't restart.
it doesn't restart. Okay.
That's why it says notwithstanding that some of the materials may have not been there more than a year.
So if you completely clean the property off, have we thought about how that fits into this definition? You clean it up, it's clear,
Okay, and then they
it's good,
restart.
and say for a month, and then you go back to your old hoarding ways, and you got rubbish and garbage stored there. What do you guys think? Your clock start over, or something to think about? I don't know if we have a fast answer for it, but we probably should think about that. Maybe better defining timing. All right, 53102.
Before you go on, can I just mention, for the audience, I see some of you not looking at your phone. Since we are reading line by line, we have this online that you can access through City of Streetsboro, and people at home maybe want to read it too. cityofstreetsboro.com, then you go to the departments and public meetings. Under public meetings, find us in special service committee meeting of the 17th, and the packet then has this actual text you can read along with us. And for you guys here in the building, there is one hard copy on the table by the restrooms if you want to read it or share or whatever. So just so you can be part of the meeting. We have that
Steve,
information.
should we, before we move on to a new chapter, should we discuss anything
Yeah.
in the definition chapter we may have issues with, or?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do. That's a good idea. Then we'll come back to the declaration of nuisance. We'll pick up there, and let's go over these definitions and throw out just any comments, thoughts, everything. It's a work session as to what you may be thinking.
Yeah, one of my concerns is, I guess moving from residential, essentially property, to every piece of land that's taxed in the city of Streetsboro. A lot of these I don't think should be applicable to vacant, undeveloped lots. Commercial lots may have or need different, storage requirements. If there are portions of this we want to apply to commercial, let's say the grass cutting, because I agree, all right, even though you're a commercial or an industrial district, you should probably keep your grass nice too, because that impacts the look of the city. We can add that to the specific portion of, the code that addresses the grass or whatever, but I don't know that I'm comfortable, and I think you mentioned this before, not only putting this on every single parcel, but then not even including ourselves. And I know we can't fine ourselves, but we should hold ourselves to the same standard that we hold the residents. So I kind of take umbrage with that. I would like to see that that needs just to go back.
So are you on I just for purposes?
Yeah,
of
I'm on I.
Parcel of land
Yeah.
means any parcel of real property recognized by the Portage County Auditor. And that would be a new way to think about what parcels are subject to the new rules, and eliminates the old definition, which was, I'm only reading it to see,
It's essentially residential.
private premise, or premise means any dwelling. This is what they're asking us to throw out. Any dwelling, house, building, or other structure designed and used either wholly or in part for a private residential purpose, whether inhabited or temporarily or continuously uninhabited, or temporarily or continuously uninhabited and vacant. It includes any yard, grounds, walk, driveway, sidewalks, and abutting property between the property line and the curb, porch, steps, vestibule, mailbox belonging or pertinent to such dwelling, house, building, or other structure. So that's being thrown out, which I think Justin kind of correctly sums it up to basically a private residence, and being replaced with, I don't know, other than the public rights of way, I can't. Are there such things that could be parcels of land that wouldn't fit our new definition? I think it would be everything, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think it broadens it too much to commercial
It is
properties.
everything, right?
It's every single parcel that's taxed in the city of Streetsboro.
Even if taxes, that means any parcel of real property recognized by the Portage County Auditor. Is there any parcel of property in the city that's not recognized by the auditor? I don't think there is such a
No.
thing.
No, I think the intent was not to exclude any parcels. If there's a nuisance, regardless of the district that it's in, or whether it's vacant or not, a nuisance can be located anywhere. And it was to keep in mind, the definition that you just read that's being eliminated, that was when it was in the litter chapter.
Yeah, but a nuisance in an industrial parkway doesn't have the same impact as it does in a residential. Like if I...
Agreed.
So I don't know that, maybe we write separate ordinances for residential and industrial or commercial properties, because I don't think you can apply the same logic to both of those. A residential nuisance has a much bigger impact on residential property values than an industrial nuisance that may exist, but it's even out of sight because it's behind a building or something in an industrial parkway. So again, I don't think you apply the same logic. And also there are different needs in commercial or industrial where there may be a nuisance there, but there may be a reason it's there, and they will take it. There's other things that occur in industrial lands that don't occur on residential. And I'm just concerned that lumping everything into one code is going to over broadly burden in the industrial districts or the commercial districts with residential code that was really geared for residential use. So I don't mind having a nuisance code for industrial and stuff. I just don't think that it should be the same code as residential. That's my opinion.
Just raise your hand, Albert.
What on that thought, I tend to agree there. I think if we start from a base that there are differences in how I think we want to see rules applied throughout the city. I understand the new definition of parcel is everything, except city-owned property. But then it's further broke down when you get down into nuisances. But can we at least, does the administration disagree that there are some differences? Go ahead, I don't.
And I guess I don't like to speak for the administration as a whole.
I'm saying in general, the thought
I mean, there are certainly inherent differences between a non-residential piece of property and a residential piece of property. Currently in the zoning code, there are outdoor display and storage regulations that apply in the business district and the industrial district that do not apply in residential districts. For obvious reasons. Those businesses have a need for outdoor display and storage. And so we've used those regulations, and the regulations for outdoor display and storage are different in the B business district than they are in the industrial district. So I think I certainly understand and can appreciate the differences in districts and the intensity of use and everything that goes along with any business in the industrial district when compared to anything that happens in a residential district.
And I think, I don't want to jump too far ahead because I do want to go block by block, but maybe we can read this next section because it'll help us to debate these things. The declaration of nuisance, because they do break down some differences. We good with doing that?
Yeah.
Okay, so they take out in 53102 litter on occupied private property and scratch it out. Create a new header called declaration of nuisance. Take out those 4 or 5 lines, and they create a new section that says the following conditions are hereby declared to be nuisances. And it's A, and then there's 1, 2, and 3, and then there's B, 1, 2, and 3. So you have 2 different sections. A, this is a nuisance, is any grass, weeds, and any other non-woody plants having grown 8 inches tall or higher that meet the definitions under 1, 2, and 3. They have to be on any parcel of land within a platted residential subdivision, or on any portion of any parcel of land that's within 50 feet of an occupied residential structure. Well, I'm sorry, it's not or, it's and on any portion of any parcel of land that was within 30 feet of any public right-of-way that is open to the public.
No, these are ors, not ands.
Oh, they just put "and" to go to 3. Okay, I
Yeah.
see. So we limit the grass and non-woody plants to platted residential subdivisions and any parcel, so even outside residential, that's within 50 feet of an occupied residential structure, and on any portion or parcel of land, so any land within 30 feet of any public right-of-way or any private right-of-way that's open to the public. Okay. B is trees, brush, or other woody plants growing on any parcel of land, so this is everywhere, that obstructs any portion of a public right-of-way. 2, that presents a risk due to unstable conditions of falling into a public right-of-way. And 3, in the opinion of the city engineer, obstructs traffic sightlines necessary for safe vehicular travel. So they define these things. C is a definition of, it goes into long-term outdoor storage of refuse, new or used building materials, new or used building parts, signs, junk motor vehicles, motor vehicle parts, trailers, household appliances or equipment, indoor furniture, pallets, fencing, bins, tanks, and other bulk containers, construction equipment, material handling equipment, road maintenance machines, equipment and tools, landscaping machines, equipment and tools, public utility fixtures and equipment, ladders, scaffolding, tools, and other unusable property on any parcel of land not principally used for agricultural purposes. So this is under the declaration of nuisance, and if we go back to the top, it says the following conditions are hereby declared to be nuisances. And C is the long-term outdoor storage of all that stuff. And when we go back to what long-term means in M up above, halfway down page 2, it means more than 1 year time as measured from the commencement of any outdoor storage. Notwithstanding that some of the materials may have been stored for less than 1 year. I still have a problem with the way that's being worded. So, am I to read C? I'm just thinking out loud here. To say you can have all those things for 364 days as long as they're gone for the 365th. Let's be generous and say it's gone for a month, or 2 months, or a season. It's winter and we get rid of all that stuff. Then you bring it back and does your clock start over? Again, I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not pointing a finger at anybody to answer or come up with it. I just want all of us to start thinking about that.
And here's on this one where I think there's a lot of confusion, especially with the residents, even maybe just because of the way it's worded. So essentially it says, look, if you've got, and I'll use it because everybody else was, if you've got a trailer that's been sitting on your property for a year, then it can be considered a nuisance. Nowhere in here does it say that trailer has to be junk or unusable, right? It's not clear. So people are concerned, yeah, all right, I have a trailer, maybe I don't use it. Maybe I don't, but I like having a trailer. I use it once every 2 years. It sits there, it's in good repair. It sits on the side of my garage, it's in good repair, tires are full. I keep it up, but I just don't use it often. So that should not be a nuisance. And Andre and I were speaking, and he said, well, no, it has to be unusable, junked. And I go, well, that's not clear in here. So I think adding some very clarifying adjectives to make it very apparent that we're not talking about things in good repair, but things that are obviously just completely done and unusable and can't be fixed, right? So that's one thing I would say to clarify this. Honestly, I don't know. I would probably rewrite that whole section, and it's very unclear. It's very ambiguous. It leaves a lot of room for subjectiveness. what, as someone brought up at the last meeting we had this on, one of the residents, one man's trash is another man's treasure, so what may be junk to you, I may not feel is junk.
No,
I understand that's why they're adding the due process portion of this, which I think is great. I mean, we should have had that all along. The residents should always have a path to fight City Hall if they have to. But I don't want to put them in a position where they have to unnecessarily, especially when it's an extremely subjectively written ordinance. So I would either clean that up, add some very clarifying adjectives to all of it, or rewrite it in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, is there a way for us, language-wise, to get creative to remove the junk that we all would look at and be like, yeah, that's crap, it's not being used, it's not plated, it's rusted, there's a wheel missing, it's been there for 5 years, we want to cite you, but, Mr. Guy that's got his trailer out there that he hauls his construction materials back and forth, parks it on the side of his garage or behind his garage or next to his outbuilding, that he uses for work every, spring season to do mulch or something. I don't really want to be a part of an ordinance that cites that person.
Right.
And I don't think that Section C is there yet in making that distinction.
Agreed.
And we have to get more creative in our writing and how we do it. Go ahead, Amir.
You guys are thinking about the victim, okay, that we're going after with the trailer and the construction equipment. What about people that live on either side of them? Don't they have a right to have the property maintained up to a certain standard?
Well, we were saying we don't think in good repair. That's what was the problem, is that this wasn't clear. It's not clear in here that we were talking about junk. It only says trailers. It doesn't say junk
I
trailers.
agree that, I don't know what
Because if it's a good
say,
repair and it's sitting next to the garage, that does nothing to my neighbor's property value.
Well,
If it's
you're
junk,
not the
then
neighbor.
it does. Well, I have the right to enjoy my property, and the neighbor doesn't have a right to tell me not to enjoy my property. So as long as it's a good repair and it's
But
not
you're
good looking,
He's not being able to enjoy his property.
well, he can put up a
If he's
fence.
got-
I don't know what.
If
Look,
this person has all kinds of construction materials and everything else, I mean,
I hear
the
you.
pendulum swings
and
both ways.
I hear you. It does. The problem is that is so subjective
Yeah.
that, if I can't think of a thing right now to be witty enough, but it's so subjective that what I may not want on your property if me and you were neighbors, and then Karen moves in next to us and she isn't happy until everybody's living on a white marble slate with nothing on it, and that's beauty to her. The minute you put a diamond on it, it's garbage or whatever. Like, you can't, somebody may look over and see a $100,000 bass boat in a trailer and be like, that's just white trash, and not
And
realize
I don't
that's
disagree with you.
$150,000 worth of gear, and somebody goes out and makes a living on Lake Erie for the summer. Like, I don't want to leave it up to Karen to decide that guy can't have that in the yard. Like, ban all boats, ban all trailers, ban all. I'd rather leave it to the HOAs, because at least you go in with a heads up when you buy land in an HOA what it says, and you're going to have to do battle with your HOA.
and the city's not an HOA.
Well,
We
I
shouldn't
think
treat
we're
our residents
creating,
as-
I
we
think
shouldn't treat our
we're
residents
creating a
as we are.
citywide
Sometimes we're thought of that
HOA.
way.
Yeah, we're creating.
Well, I agree with you,
Yeah.
Mr. Mishniak. And I want Andre to speak here. There is something to be said about rewriting this particular section, because there is ambiguity in it. And I think that we need to get more, and I think Andre has an opinion on something here, and I'd like, if it's okay with you.
Oh,
I'd like
it's
him-
a work session. That's why we're just doing it. Yeah, jump in.
Oh, I hear the council, and I agree that we need to specify more that the intent was for wrecked, abandoned, or dismantled trailers or boats or cars, not for personal use equipment that's in good condition. So I made a note of that to kind of clarify that into a new language.
Okay. So
Because
we-
that was the main confusion last time, where people were like, whoa, I cannot have a boat or a trailer. And I was like, no, you can. It's we're going to correct the language and identify specifically, because we have definitions what's a junk motor vehicle, which it says basically has to be wrecked or dismantled, and including recreational vehicles. So just to clarify, it's nothing to do with, you can have a personal trailer into your driveway with a lawnmower on it. You can have a boat, you can have a trailer. We don't have any language in our city ones, as far as I know, that doesn't allow that. It allows it almost like,
That would be-
most of the districts, as far as I know.
Okay, so that, I think Mr. Ring's correct. C doesn't say it that way.
Yeah, it says only at the end, other unusable personal property, so that's not very clear.
It needs to be made.
So it needs to be more clear, like what actually it's intended.
We agree as a work group, the intent
Yes.
is the old crap, the old broken down stuff that is not being used, not at all.
And even then, it's a long term, so it's for a year. So usually what happens, if it's in really like wrecked or dismantled, auto parts, or a tire is completely missing, a trailer is upside down, like it has to be very bad. It cannot be just like I'm working on it. If people are working on their stuff, there is time for them to work, and we can't say anything about it.
And even then, it has to be 12 months.
Again, like for example, it's if someone works on their car, like we had last time, someone said I was restoring a car and I got cited. It was not me. I double checked. It was a previous inspector. But then I talked with the gentleman to understand better what was the situation, and he explained me. And I said, well, technically, if you work on the car but you don't have parts and engine left and right in your driveway, which creates a blight to the neighborhood, and like carefully through the process, even if you work in your driveway, then cover your car with a proper cover, not like a blue tarp. Technically doesn't look that bad, and you're like trying to improve what you have on your property. So I wouldn't consider that would be an issue. And in the language in property maintenance and in the traffic code, it says it needs to be wrecked or dismantled, and auto parts need to be, like exposed to the elements, kind of. That's the idea. So again, it has to be pretty bad. It's not just like a little bit. And then again, the zoning inspector, which is me, a lot of times has to make a judgment call based on what I see. You cannot define everything and all the circumstances that might happen in this city. So it's really hard sometimes, and I have to look at it. I have to look at the code, what the language says, and I have to look at what I see. And again, it has to be really bad. You can't just, one tire on the side and be like, oh my God, you have one tire, you have to be cited, which he got cited for several tires that were covered. Again, what we talked about subjective as the issue with tires, usually it accumulates water, which attracts mosquitoes, which can bring disease. So if the tires were covered and were not accumulating water, does it look nice? For someone, yes. For someone, no. But for me as an inspector, as long as it's not accumulating water, I can't just personally say I don't like it.
I think what we want to avoid, though, is too much subjectiveness.
Yeah.
Right? We want to give the inspectors straightforward guidance on what they're looking for and what we want them to look for, and not just because you may not ticket someone for that, right? But obviously the previous inspector did. So you may not be the inspector here in 5 years, and the next guy may be more stringent than you. So we want clear, defined guidance. Now, there's always got to be some subjectivity, obviously, and there's got to be some logic and common sense used when you're citing people. But I think one of the goals of this is to give all future inspectors that guidance on what our city is looking for.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think as a resident too, I think you have to be specific, and I disagree that, really bad to you isn't really bad to him, isn't really bad to him. That's a useless term when you're trying to apply the law. We need specific, I like 12 months, junk, whatever, define it. That needs to be specific. It can't be Like, if you can't store tires outside in any greater number than 2 or 4 or 12, whatever we decide, it shouldn't be like, well, unless they have water versus this. That's the kind of thing that you enforced it against him, but you didn't enforce it against him last year. I'd rather it be defined so that when they look at it, they say, well, I got a year to get rid of it. I can't store more. I'm just making up examples. I can't store more than 2 tires in any one spot within, 20 feet of my house. That way, it's bright line, like, no, that's a violation, that's not a violation, and we can vote on it in a way that I'm not comfortable giving administrative law executioners from the executive department any discretion. I want you to have something to read, and you can go out and say, that's what it is. I don't want you to have to say, well, it's really bad or not. You're allowed then, if you find something that fits the definition, you have within the mayor can grant you the authority, you have what's called discretion, and you can work it out with them. You do it all the time. You go up and you tell them, hey, I'm going to give you X amount of time, I'm going to work with you, maybe if you just do this and that. You can choose to cite one, and you could choose not to. That's within your purview, and if he don't like it, he could fire you, or he can tell you that's how I want it. But I don't want there to be the discretion for you to say, well, it's not really bad, it's not really this, and then they don't understand when they're in compliance or not. We need to do a better job of defining what's junk, how long they can have it, and not let Karen decide what's junk, because one lady's $150,000 trailer and bass boat and Loran system that's going up to Lake Erie is another guy's, life's work to collect and save money and get. And we can't leave it up to, not you personally, but we can't leave it up to.
Oh, no, I agree. Well, by expressing myself really bad is just like,
No,
it was just a figurative
I'm
speech.
not faulting you, I'm just
but
saying.
I agree, it has to be in the code as specific as possible.
Yeah.
And as much as we'll try, and I agree, no matter how specific you get, depends who you hire. Sometimes people might have their own interpretation, and that's why due process is important, because it could be, as you said, and I agree, I've been 7 years in code enforcement, and I've been in a department, we had like 10 inspectors. And sometimes each inspector had their own interpretation of the same language, was very specific. So I know we're going to tailor it as much as we can and try to do our best. But at the end, I know it's very important, to hire the right people, let's put it that way.
John, you want to?
Yeah, so on your guys' point about the being subjective, I guess more so about motor vehicles and trailers, I would like to see something in the definition. I was reading through these definitions, and under refuse, it takes out, the section we took out of that definition was, it mentioned abandoned automobiles. And then in the long-term storage we were talking about in section C here, it says junk motor vehicles. Maybe we can define.
There is in a different section. Oh, sorry.
Oh, another section.
There is a different section in traffic code what junk motor vehicle means. I can pull it out.
Can we refer that to this section?
Yes.
Or incorporate it?
Yeah.
Can we not just,
Incorporate it in.
I mean, we
can we
already-
not just put the definition in here also? Because I did notice that myself.
Gotcha.
Just so when someone, because what's going to happen is someone's not going to know to go and look in the, or if we direct them to look in that, but I think as a courtesy, maybe for that section, we could just throw it in there.
It's easier for people to understand if it's right in the same document.
But then that way, there is that in there that determines what is considered a junk or abandoned vehicle, trailer, whatever. So then that way, like what Mr. Ring said, you might not be here in 5 years, we might not be here in 5 years. So then that way, it's clear cut. I was kind of confused on the front page with definition F of motor vehicles, recreational vehicles, and mini trucks. It doesn't really specify if it's in working condition or not, so I don't want that to be, I guess if we can clear that up, it would get rid of that subjectiveness of this definition here. And maybe change that in there too, so I don't know, I didn't read what the Ohio Revised Code said about motor vehicles, how that's defined, but that way, you or whoever's in your position's not like, well, that car is running, but it looks like junk to me, so I'm gonna cite you for it. I don't think that's going to happen, but just so in the future. if
Yeah,
it does
I
happen.
just have to indicate the section where it indicates what's a junk motor vehicle, abandoned motor vehicle. We have a different section, 3 or 4, so we can do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Couple things you gotta remember, probably 80 to 90% of his job is complaint driven, okay? Neighbors call in, they say, this thing's been sitting here for 2 years, why haven't you done anything about it, okay? When Andre goes out there, knocks on a door, people come to the door, and he says, hey, we have received a complaint of all of this stuff that's in your yard. It's currently in violation of the zoning code, such and such, such and such. We want to work with you to try and get it cleaned up. And it calls to mind the guy that lived on Tower Drive. There's a gentleman that lived on Tower Drive that his yard was an absolute catastrophe. Catastrophe. We worked and worked, and I think Bob was finally successful in getting him to clean it. Thankfully, the house finally went into a foreclosure, and we were able to get it. And if you look at that piece of property now, that piece of property is very nice. And that ultimately is the goal, the goal of this is to try and make it so that when you drive down Pike Parkway or when you drive down Evergreen, you don't go nice house, nice house, nice house, crap hole, nice house, nice house, nice house. You don't do that, okay? And ultimately, that's what this is about. I mean, I drive around, I don't make complaints to Andre. If they don't come in from a neighbor, then unless it's egregious. And, you know, I can drive by, I can show you homes on Page Road right now that I go down Page Road constantly over to the parks. And there are 2 homes that are there that have had cars in the front yard now for at least a couple years. And that is the whole purpose of this, is to try and give us the teeth to take away and to clean this stuff up. The neighbors around it are not that bad. In fact, they're nice. Yards are kept. These people have a car in their front yard. The grass is ultra high. And right now, we really don't have a drive to do that. Nobody is here to bust the residents' butts about this stuff. But like I said, about 80 to 90% of his job is complaint driven by neighbors that live on either side or across the street that are tired of looking at this. When they work very hard to keep their homes up, and you have one person that destroys basically a whole street. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I agree, there are some ambiguities in here that we can address. But to take the teeth out of this ordinance, I think is doing a terrible disservice to the residents that work very hard, very, very hard, to keep their houses nice, to keep their shutters painted, to keep their yards trimmed, to put their gardens in and stuff like that. And then to have a neighbor that's next to them that is allowed to keep their property in such disrepair, okay? It's not fair.
No, I agree.
It's not fair to those people.
We all agree on that. Like John and I were just talking for a second about the long-term storage thing. There needs to be a way we can flesh that out so that it's not just one continuous year, but maybe for 12 months, and then a definition that allows us to account for people playing games. And they put it all in the garage for 2 weeks, and then they put it back out and say, I have another year. So that it says, you know, not more than 12 months. Said time doesn't have to be continuous, accumulation of 12 months over at least a 60-month period or something like that. Because you're going to get the gamesmanship where they're going to walk a video around their yard and be like, I cleaned it all up. And a week later, they're going to put it all back out and say, I got 12 more months, see you later.
Well, you do, hold on.
Process all over again.
No, hold on. If you do that, though, then you're going to ensnare the people that store their equipment for 2 or 3 months, you know, maybe seasonal equipment. And so they store it for 3 months. Well, each year for 5 years, that's 15 months now they've gotten
But it's still got
ensnared
to be a
into it.
nuisance. It's still got to be, we're going to fix C so that it's
Yeah.
the junk. I'm not going to sign any legislation that could remotely possibly tag somebody who uses a trailer, uses it. I want it clear that this is the broken down junk crap
Right.
that they're not using, and it's for more than a 12-month period, and if they move it or hide it or cover it, it could be an accumulated 12 months. Like, otherwise we're going to have people play the game. I'm not going to sign a piece of legislation that prevents somebody to haul a backhoe, or, they got a working trailer and it's hidden behind their outbuilding back on Bartlett Road. I don't give a crap, but this is every parcel in the city.
Yeah.
We got to go get them, and I know you're not going to do that. The problem is the guy that we do go after is going to say, why don't you go after your buddy on Bartlett that's
And-
got 4
and that's
trailers, and you're going to
exactly
say, because that's not so bad, and the magistrate's going to say, well, this is not clear, it's ambiguous, I'm throwing the case out. So I want things to be tidy and
But see,
tight.
Steve, that's when Andre can go to that guy that's on Bartlett Road that has a backhoe, okay?
I don't want to enforce against him.
Exactly.
who's he
He can go
bothering?
out there and,
He shouldn't even have to go out there.
Who's
That's
he
the
bothering?
point.
Yeah,
That's the point.
That's my point, but if we include language that's too overbroad, I'm only going to sign a piece of legislation that it's the absolute junk. It's broke down, it's not plated, it hasn't been used in a year or more, and we can show a judge or magistrate this is crap. And I'm not going to sign a piece of legislation that I grew up in Streetsboro. We're not Hudson. We're not Bath. We're never going to be that. People need to get that through their head. We're never going to be that. Never, never, never. You want that? Pony up your money and move to Summit County. We can be classy here, we can keep things nice without at the same time saying you can't have your $100,000 bass boat. The guy on Bartlett can't haul a backhoe and do a trench service. You want to run a trench service, you want to be a trencher, don't do it out of your outbuilding on your farm. Go buy a company in Deerfield or something. People can still do that in this town, at least for the foreseeable future. They can work with their hands, they can work with the soil, they can own, keep, and purchase the materials that they need to do that without offending Karen. And we shouldn't be up here saying we want to be Hudson, we want to be Bath. Let the HOAs handle that crap. And if you're not in an HOA, that's a blessing. Good for you. Just don't have junk and unused stuff. And I'm afraid we're creeping towards what I like and what I think is comfortable, what I think is beautiful, and what you think, and then all of a sudden we're in Subjectiveville. Like,
nobody wants to be Hudson and Aurora,
well,
okay?
I've met a lot of people that think they are.
Well,
Believe me, in Julie's neighborhood, there's a lot of us.
Well, I can tell you from this end, the administration
reason
does
they're there
not
is
want
'cause
to
the
be
taxes
Hudson
are
and Aurora.
lower.
Okay, but I do want the people that live in the subdivisions and the developments in their homes to be able to enjoy their property, okay, so that their neighbors next door are not dragging, picture someone trying to sell a home and they live next door to one of these things. That could be a detriment to those folks too.
I agree.
And I agree with you guys. There probably needs to be some sharpening up of the verbiage in here, and that's definitely something we work on. But I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and get rid of this stuff.
No, I'm not. But I'm just letting you know where I stand, and that is I'm with you on the junk. I'm going after it, but I'm not on board for the useful stuff. Lisa, what do you got?
Well, this kind of brings me to my biggest point, being the representative for Ward 4. We're a huge rural residential ward. We also have Stonegate, but Stonegate has rules. And I think there should be a massive exemption for rural residential areas on a lot of this stuff, because we do live differently. That's why a lot of us have chosen to live out there. You're gonna take my parcel, we've got, between my family, several parcels, lots of acres, and anywhere on one parcel that's toward the corner of Seasons, toward the little house on the corner, could get dinged, but we live differently out there. So I think it would be appropriate, I can see if you're in town here in a residential area that doesn't have an HOA, some things would be more applicable, but this is really broad, and I really would like to see something defined differently for rural residential, or some exemptions made, as are in other chapters within our code, other than rural residential. So that's a point that I want to make, and I think I'm here to represent that view.
Well, you remember when Jerry the farmer lived on Ferguson. okay? Terry the farmer, he had all of his, he didn't have barn storage, all of his equipment was outside, okay? And I think that's exactly what you're pointing at, is that in that agriculture area or the bigger area, you have people that are on 10, 15 acre parcels, and I know a lot of people out there have backhoes and things like that they just leave out there. And I don't disagree with you, Lisa.
Right, but this needs cleared up in order to not have any question there, because we do have some folks buying some land, moving in, building big, beautiful homes out in rural residential, and when they decide they don't like how we've all been, I just want there to be some protections, especially for the folks out in rural residential. And we have people that have beautiful, immaculate acres out there too, and I'm sure Mr. Alexander would be fine with me mentioning his name tonight. His yard is immaculate, it's gorgeous, but he doesn't mind that some of us around him might have some fencing laying for, 5 years can go by fast when you're working on acres and acres, and no, I never moved that fencing in 5 years, but he doesn't care. So there's, a heart out there, whether it's an immaculate yard, but I do think as people tend to move our direction and build big, beautiful homes, I want to protect the heart of Streetsboro and the rural residential. So if there could be some
I think we need to make some
language for
differences on
that
parcel
matters to me
size and stuff.
and
But
my residents.
I agree. The ornamental grasses, also, I wanted to point something out just so you take some notes. This is at 53102, the very beginning of the following conditions are hereby declared to be nuisances. A, grass, weeds, and any other non-woody plants having grown 8 inches, all right? One of the many jobs I held working my way through college and law school was landscape. I worked for a construction landscape company. We did a lot of plants, planting, beds. So I'm thinking hostas. Hostas get bigger than 8 inches. They're not woody. Helianthus, right? We all know the helianthus plants. They're everywhere. People plant all kind of variations of sunflowers. Those are going to be up there. Ornamental grasses. Go to my yard right now. Go to your yard, Glenn. There's ornamental grasses that are way higher than 8 inches. And the way we wrote this, think of that guy who we're going to go after for not mowing his grass is going to say, well, the mayor's got grass that's more than here. And the defense attorney's going to put a photo up and going to say, look, the mayor's got ornamental grasses. Mishniak's wife's got ornamental grasses in the bed in her house over there on Emerald Avenue. They're 5 feet tall. Nobody cited Mishniak and nobody cited Glenn. But poor little me, my grass was 10 inches tall because my mower broke and I didn't have the money to fix it. And Andre wrote me a ticket. So we need to better define that. What I would like to see is create an A and then a B and a C that just defines lawns and grass, because we all agree on that. It seems to be a non-issue, right? Unless you're growing hay for animals, and not include weeds and other non-woody plants, because tomato plants would fall as a nuisance under this. They're not woody. They better be more than 8 inches by now, or you're not going to have tomatoes in August and September. And marijuana plants, they're legal. Somebody could put them in their yard right now. Under this, they'd be a nuisance. I don't smoke, I don't partake, but for my friends that do, I don't want to preclude them from, now that it's legal and they fought for it and we changed the Constitution, it'd be a nuisance because it's a non-woody plant, and I'm sure they're going to be bigger than 8 inches. Like that, we got to start thinking outside the box here about what we're doing.
Why did we go from 10 inches to 8 inches?
I don't know.
Well, the 8 inches, by the time we site them and mow it, the grass grows so fast it gets out of control.
Well, it used to be 10. I was just wondering
Well,
why.
Akron has been 8 for years and years and years, so.
We're not Akron.
I know, but I speak to Akron because I know about Akron.
Right,
So
I
I'm
was just
just
wondering
comparing.
what was
It
the
beats
reason.
our mowers up when we do it.
Okay.
I mean, the taller it gets, the worse it is on our regular equipment. So the 8, by the time we site them, is 10 or 12 or better. By the time the week goes by and we come back and mow it the next week.
And in the spring, Lisa, if it comes to the attention at 8 inches, okay, by the time they're able to get to it, because don't forget, they have to post it first, all right? And it takes 5 days for the posting, all right? So we can't even touch it for 5 days. Then the owner has within that 5 days to get the land. So that 8 inches that brought it to their attention at the end of 5 days is probably somewhere near 10 or 11 inches.
Or more, yeah.
Or more, okay? And that's, it gives these guys a head start on giving the folks a notice that their grass is getting too high.
That's fine. I was just wondering why, because
Yeah.
it seems like the process has probably been the same over the years, and now we've gone from 10 to 8, so I was just curious what the reasoning was.
Like Billy said, you try to go through there with a mower with, especially in the spring with 12 inches of grass, and it
I know.
ain't easy. Yeah.
Hey, I know.
Andre, what are other cities' height ordinances for their grass? Do you know?
Depending where it goes from 6 to 10.
Okay,
So
so we're
it's-
right in the range there.
Yeah.
Can we bust out a separate column for lawns, grasses, and make sure we're clear? Because that's
I can see how, because we never thought about tomatoes or actual flowers. So if
Agree with me there,
yeah,
absolutely.
so if you think more,
Yeah.
who knows who's gonna be after me might have some sort of interpretation that you gotta cut everything down. So I can see how it can be sometimes a question like what exactly I need to cut and what I can keep.
I think this is another place, though, where Ms. McDaniel was alluding to and right. I don't, on any parcel of property within 30 feet of a public right-of-way, right? Well, that's, every parcel of property at some point was within 30 feet of a right-of-way, right? If you're on a street. I really have a problem with this including undeveloped parcels of land. Just fields that are already like there today. Now somebody's got to go mow a field before it gets to 8 inches because it's within 30 feet of a right-of-way. So it's on 303. It's an empty, undeveloped lot that's been there for 50 years. It's just a field, and now somebody's got to go mow it, or the owner of that property is
What
going
if
to get
it's an
fined.
obstruction people can't see because,
Well, that's right. That's part of the,
Okay.
that's a part of the traffic code too, right? Or there's other parts of the code that talk about obstruction, that's different, but
Okay.
I'm just concerned about undeveloped.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Right, I get
undeveloped
it.
parcel of land, it's just a
Our guys
field.
go out and they cut up to the right of way.
Well, that's fine, but this is saying,
30 feet.
it's saying if,
within 30 feet of the right-of-way.
it says, on any portion or parcel of land that is within 30 feet of any public right-of-way. So
So
a
you're
parcel of.
saying they're saying they got to cut back 30 feet.
No,
right of way.
that's not how that reads. That's any parcel of land that is within 30 feet of a public right-of-way.
Right, the whole
That's
par-
the whole
the entire
parcel.
parcel,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
that's the way that reads.
Right.
So, again,
Again, wording, I guess.
yeah, the wording really needs to be worked on, and I think, and this goes back to my problem with the definition of parcel of land and it not being, it including everything in the city. I really like to see that broken out.
Yeah, I like what Lisa
Yeah.
said about, like, there's
Yeah.
certain areas that we can carve out, exceptions.
Well, and I'd like to just see that almost two different ordinances, one for residential and one for all other, districts. But, these are just some of the concerns I have. The wordings are very, very ambiguous, and when you read it, I just don't think that's right.
Well, I see the law director and the zoning inspector and the planning and zoning, they're all writing a lot of notes here, so.
Well, one of my concerns from the section was that, and I saw some residents had these concerns too, back to having, a boat or a maintained vehicle, maybe it doesn't look like it's a $100,000 vehicle or a $100,000 boat, but it's somewhat maintained. I don't want them to have to go to a storage facility with their stuff.
That's-
You know what I mean?
They don't have to.
But that was the consensus in the beginning.
Right.
If someone has a boat in their driveway, not on a trailer, and it's been laying there for a long period of time.
Right. But it wasn't specific, and that's what the concern was.
And that's what these guys are looking at.
Yeah, right.
They'll look at
I'm just saying, that was,
Are boats even on this long-term outdoor storage? Does it say boats?
Just as trailers
trailers.
Trailers, but it doesn't say anything about boats. I
and
mean-
campers. I was thinking about campers.
Well, campers
Yeah.
are kind of trailers too. Again, the trailer term being broad and.
Or other unusable personal property.
Well, this says junk motor vehicles, and if you go back to the motor vehicle description, it talks about recreational vehicles, cars, trucks, motorcycles, mini trucks. Yeah, boats aren't in there.
Boats are not in there.
Well, that was just an example.
Is that
No, I'm just saying maybe they should be.
basically about it for that section? I mean, just in the interest of time,
Yeah, we may have to do more than one work session.
Oh, we're gonna have to do more.
Well, that was already said, right? Didn't Steve already kind of?
Yeah, well, we got, what are we, 6 to 8, right? We're
Yeah.
6 to 8, right?
well, you know,
But I
one
want
thing.
to open the floor up for public for 5 minutes, just if there's any thoughts or questions, and then go back into our,
I'm gonna have to leave in about 10.
Well, and one thing that everybody has to remember is our zoning code is what, 40-some years old, 50-some years old, at least? And there is no doubt that there are sections of the code. And, you know, John has brought forth a lot of stuff over the years to address certain things that we are trying. And, you know, this is kind of the first blush at this. And we've got no problem whatsoever in giving it more specificity and using the suggestions that council gives to give it more conciseness. This guy's got a hard job.
Oh, he does,
Okay.
absolutely.
And, you know, and I agree with you, Steve, if there is something that is more specific, all right, that he can go out and point to,
It makes his job
and
easier.
show these folks,
right.
you know, this is where the problem is. It makes his job not easy, but easier. So,
yeah, I agree.
don't disagree.
And we're not ever pointing fingers. I think everybody agrees it's a work session where we're just trying to hash it out. I'm glad we're at least able to get to a point where we all agree that this is for the true junk vehicles, not anything else. And that's why I say I won't sign any legislation that tries to wiggle room around that. And I think we're all on board with that. That's if we only accomplish that tonight, I think that was worth comment. But in the grass, it's like we got to start breaking down the language and thinking about what kind of grass. Like, I think we need to have a whole defined lawn thing that makes sense. And then let's talk about, you know, non-woody and woody and other types of weeds that we want to go after. I don't think that's a big problem in the city. I think it's the lawns that aren't being mowed, and if we tackle that, so be it.
Does your HOA cover lawns?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a definition of what kind of lawn or what my
I
lawn
think we're
has to
6.
be.
I think we're 6 inches.
You guys too?
I think it's 6, yeah.
So essentially, virtually anybody who has an HOA has something to cover their lawns.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but
So that's something that we will need to keep in mind too, that this is, the way that the ordinance is written is primarily gonna cover those places that don't have an HOA, because an HOA.
or if the HOA is not enforcing it.
Yeah.
As I said, I don't wanna-
I
I
get
don't wanna
calls
get-
on when they're not enforcing it.
We're not gonna be
Then I
an
gotta go
HOA.
post.
Good, I
Not
don't
by
wanna
any
be-
stretch.
that's good.
We don't want to do that.
Because there are people that purposely bought, like she's saying, out in the country and built a life, and as long as they're not bothering anybody, who are we to
Yeah.
go in there and tell them? Like I said, you can't let Karen decide what's acceptable because nobody has the same opinion, you know? It needs to be just bright line, like you can do this on your property, you can't do that. And we need to vote on it that way, so that I'm not gonna vote yes on something if I'm like, oh, I'm gonna leave it up to Andre. Then my vote is gonna be, nah, we'll go with status quo, what we have right now. We'll just stay where we are, because I'm not comfortable doing that, so, go ahead.
I agree with a lot of what I hear, and that was the intention, to start the process of putting a starting point and go from there. And I totally agree that rural residential should have a lot of exceptions. And when we wrote this, we kept that in mind. I guess we just need to do a better job of referencing those exceptions in our existing code, because we do have in our existing code where it says what in rural residential you can do compared to the R1 or R2.
You know, it may be useful if you print that stuff for us for the next work session, because we keep referring, cross-referencing stuff.
Yeah.
We create a packet of relevant documents so we can know what you're talking about.
And then we can look more further into
Some good
the
ideas.
grass as we discussed. And yeah, the idea was, you know, and again, I don't enforce this systematically where I like drive around and look for things. Like I get calls after calls and after calls. And I think last time someone indicated, so what if my neighbor calls, I will get cited? Well, it doesn't work that way. If it doesn't fall under the code, I call back and tell whoever complained that well, that doesn't fall under the code, so I can't do anything about it, and that's how the code dictates. So I usually try to explain what the code indicates and what might be considered a violation based on the code and what not, because some residents are concerned that anytime anyone complains, the inspector is just going to go there and, tell things. Like if I see there is no violation, I don't even approach the property or the owner. I don't talk with anyone. I just call back whoever complained if I have a phone number, because sometimes council members say one of the residents complained, or sometimes anonymously someone leaves a voicemail with no callback phone number. A lot of things that are like in rural residential that I cannot see, even if someone complains, if I can't see it from the road, I can't see it from the road, so I can't do anything about it, even if it's in the code. So with so many acres of land, that's the idea of rural residential. Usually if it's in the back somewhere there, it doesn't bother anyone. No one will even know about it. Rural residential does have a lot of exceptions of allowing commercial equipment, tractors, all kind of trailers. So there is a zoning regulation of storage equipment. We just need to do, I guess, a better job to reference those sections to be more clear.
Yeah. All right, at least for a few minutes here, I want to open the floor up to public. If you have any comments or questions that you want to ask about anything we've gone over so far, you can come to the podium. If not, we'll just continue reading through the statute. Come on up and just state your name for the record, first and last name, and go ahead and ask your question or state your statement.
I spoke up here last time, Tyler Thompson. I just want to say thank you for the council people. I see you guys have a lot of good points on this, and you're watching out for the homeowners. I do encourage, like Justin Ring said, he isn't going to support it if the town isn't doing it, and I would encourage you guys to take a drive through the Parks and Rec and Service Department and just take a look at the city before you vote on this. And that's just one thing I wanted to say. I also am still fighting that other piece of code that's incorrect, and I do feel they're going to lose that battle too. But I just want to encourage you guys to keep an eye on the officials we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments or questions on where we've gotten so far? Come on up, state your name, first and last name, and go ahead and make your statement.
Hello, my name is Jason LaGuardia. Just a comment to go on, you kept saying that, neighbors should also be able to enjoy their property. A few years ago, I put a pool up, landscaped it nice, all permits, everything. My neighbors didn't enjoy it. They don't like seeing it. They actually park their enclosed trailer in such a manner that they don't have to see it from their patio, which didn't bother me one bit. But that's just another thing that with nuisance, but I did everything by law, so I'm not in the wrong.
Jason, to that end, okay, if your neighbors called about your pool and the zoning inspector went out there,
All right, he couldn't do it.
he would tell them,
I know, it's just,
you're gonna.
It's the
there
Karens.
Are Karens out there.
It's the Karens.
There are Karens out there, and that's the subjectivity and the the knowledge base that he has. People aren't going to like it. Your pool is kept up. You put a deck around it. It probably looks real nice and everything. Your neighbors, they don't have a dog in that fight.
Oh, I know. It's just another one of the thoughts of, hey,
that's what he does
what
about
is a
half his time.
nuisance? Oh, I know.
Is going out there and telling Karens that, you know what, you don't have an issue here.
Yeah, I don't think they ever called it. No one ever came by, but
Yeah, so.
just one of those nuisance things that
I know.
to everybody else is a problem, but to someone else isn't. So, all right, that's all I.
Thank you, Mr. Guardia. Any other comments or questions from the public? Come on up, state your name first and last, and go ahead and make your statement.
So my name is Sally Jacobs. I've lived here for 35 years. I've seen this town grow, expand, do a lot of things that we wish we could have taken back. We are a working class city, and I'm talking about city, not the rural. And we need to keep in mind that people work. They can't afford to do some of the things that originally you guys were asking people to do with their working equipment. So I want you guys, and I thank you because that is great. You guys need to make sure it's the vehicles that are the nuisance, not the working class people. I was really upset tonight when I started reading. I'm like, I'm coming here to remind us. That's what Streetsboro is all about, working class. And if people don't like the working class, and yes, there's a lot of things we need to clean up, there's a lot of junk, but we just need to put it into perspective and not push people that can't afford things to make it more than a working class city. And that's why I moved here originally. I came from Cleveland to Hudson, and I'm like, I want no part of Hudson. I came to Streetsboro. I don't like all the fast food restaurants, but hey, you know. So, yes, so thank you.
No, great
and I will
points, yeah.
definitely be coming back to these meetings because we need to be reminded of everything, so.
Yeah, great points. I totally agree with you, having grown up here myself.
Yeah, well, I didn't grow up here, but I wound up here.
That's all right, you've been here a long time, 30 plus is a long time. All right, let's move, oh, one more, go ahead.
Ted Hurd, 769 David Drive, and I just wanted to remind council that, you know, we're kind of in a couple different phases that I'm sure you know. Defining all these things, I think, is a great idea. You know, the more definition that you have, the easier Andre's job's going to be. But keep in mind that his job is 80 to 90% complaint driven. And there's a big difference between whether you have a working class guy who brings his skid steer or whatever on a trailer, parks it next to the garage, gets up the next morning, goes off to work and does his stuff. There's a huge difference in that than having a yard in your neighborhood that gets 17 dumpsters of crap hauled out and cars and parts, and the neighbors are storming the council meetings, if you remember that. You know, there's a big difference. And in addition to that, not so much the stuff finally got hauled away that the neighborhood picked up. The end result of all this would be that council gives the zoning department enough teeth to enforce whatever it is that you come to the conclusion on. That's the point. So when someone does get cited because they have 20 dumpsters full of crap in their yard, it's not going to be a 1 to 2 year process to get that cleaned up. That's what I think we should concentrate on. Thank
All
you.
great points. Thank you, sir. Any other comments? All right, we still have time. I'm gonna keep pushing through. The next section sort of gets into the due process and the administration of the, E and F at the top of page 3 defines outdoor storage or deposition of hazardous materials, hazardous waste, other than those regulated under Chapter 1507, which I don't know what those are, but we'll get those next time. That may become airborne or waterborne in such manner they may migrate off the land in which they are stored, and the accumulation of litter to such extent that wind may cause the litter to migrate. That makes sense to me. Those packing peanuts are always blown around the neighborhood. So. The next section is titled, it says, the old language was owner to maintain premise free of litter. Now says, finding of public nuisance applicable to particular properties, notice to abate and service. Takes out 3 lines and adds a new A section that says, whenever the zoning inspector finds nuisance conditions defined under 53202, that's the section we just went over, to exist on any parcel of land, the zoning inspector shall issue a written notice of finding of public nuisance in order to abate, finding an order of notice to the owner, the notice shall, and then it says specifically identify the nature of the nuisance with reference to the applicable subsection. Order the owner, occupant, and/or person in charge of the parcel to abate the nuisance completely and thoroughly in compliance with any specific instruction contained in the notice. Specify a reasonable time in which to abate the nuisance, which shall take into account the nature and extent of the violation. Advise the owner and/or person in control of the right to appeal the notice to the Board of Zoning and Building Appeals, and advise the owner, occupant, and/or person in control of the abatement remedies that may be employed by the City of Streetsboro following the failure to abate the nuisance in conformance with the notice. Any owner or other person to whom a finding and order is directed shall have standing to appeal the finding and order to the Board of Zoning and Building Appeals pursuant to Section 110511. B, the notice shall be served on the owner of the applicable parcel of land. Service may be made in accordance with the procedures applicable to zoning violations. If the parcel is occupied or under the control of persons or entities and not the owner, service shall be made on those persons or entities as well. However, the inability to obtain service on a responsible party or parties other than the owner shall not invalidate any section of the city to recover its costs for abatement of a nuisance under this chapter. Service is presumed if the owner is served by certified mail at the tax mailing address of the owner identified on the records of the Portage County Auditor, or upon a statutory agent of the owner as identified on the records of the Ohio Secretary of State. If certified mail is returned, refused, the zoning inspector may obtain service by the use of regular mail. So this is kind of the how do we give notice to somebody. I want to start with a question to Andre. What do you think about Section A in the word shall? Whenever the zoning inspector finds a nuisance conditions as defined in 5302 to exist on any parcel of land, the zoning inspector shall issue a written notice of finding to the public nuisance, and then you got to include those 5 things. You got to do those 5 things. Do you, I mean, being a lawyer, may and shall, should, could, can, are very pivotal words, right? Shall is sort of the highest standard. The word shall takes any discretion away from you, and it also places a legal fiduciary duty upon you to do the act. And I don't know where I'm at on this. I don't know how I feel. I'd like to know how you feel. Do you feel like it should say shall? Because truthfully, every time you find a violation, you, under this ordinance, you have to write the citation out and you have to do those 5 things, which I think would swamp you if you, technically you're driving around, if you see one, you got to get out and write it.
But doesn't may give way too much discretion?
It does. I just want to open it up for thoughts here. Like, do we want to leave it shall? Because, I mean, you may find something, and if you follow the law here, you have to write it out, versus just going up and doing a knock and talk and saying, hey, Justin, mow your grass, otherwise we're going to come back and cite you tomorrow. Now, the mayor can do that, but this says the zoning inspector. If you find any violation, you have to write a citation out. Are you comfortable with that, or would you rather have some leeway, or have you thought about that yet?
Steve, I think the knock and talk, though, is covered under 3 in here. Where he can knock, he'll give the notice, but he can specify a reasonable amount of time which to abate the nuisance, which shall take into account the nature and the extent of the violation. So he can go and knock and say, hey, I got to give you this, but you got a month or you got a week to take care of it, before we move forward with any other enforcement of the citation.
Doesn't it start the snowball rolling, though?
I think it documents that that conversation happened, the citation.
It's a begin time, Steve.
Yeah, it's a begin time.
It's a begin time, and it starts the paper trail, okay? When he sends out a notice of violation, it is not a citation per se. It identifies what he is seeing there, okay? many, many, many times, most of the time, the overall majority of the time, people will take steps to clean up what they're doing.
And he's only required to write a notice of finding of public nuisance in order to abate. He's not ordered to issue a citation or a fine or
Well,
anything.
yeah, it defines what the notice shall
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, so I just brought it up for thoughts. I don't,
I'm good with shall, because I think you issue the written notice, then there's proof it's happened. It starts the clock. Some people are not going to do it until they actually get the written notice. So that's my opinion.
Agreed.
anybody disagree? What about the guy that this falls on? What do you think?
I mean, it was not my choice of words, and that was the law department trying to put together a due process. So,
It's standard
yeah.
language for legal
Yeah.
laws, but
I think it makes the legislation tighter.
I'm just letting you know what it means. It means you have no choice, and on top of that, it imparts a duty on you that you have to do it. And if you don't do it, it would be grounds for him or a citizen to file what's called a mandamus action, which is if they find out that you knew something and you went over to the mayor's buddy's house and you didn't cite them, they can file what's called a mandamus action and ask a court to order you to go cite the mayor's buddy because the statute says shall and there's no discretion.
We had a case like that, I'm familiar. Not like I incited someone. Someone was really trying to get their lawyers involved to put the city in the middle of a civil case, so it happens.
I'm comfortable with whatever anybody is, but I'd like to ask the boots on the ground, what do you think?
I mean, it's up to you as a council to decide, and I will just do whatever you guys decide, because I'm more of a tool in this process.
All right, Justin's a shall, the mayor's a shall, Marianne's a
I
shall,
agree.
anyone else?
I think it keeps consistency amongst the process.
And also to clarify, even if I issue a notice and let's say give them 30 days, if they call and say, well, I just got out of a hospital, I can't move, but I want to take care of it, as long as they contact us, I mean, we try to work with them and might give them an extension, understanding the circumstances. But usually what happens if we don't know what's happening, the issuing the notice, it's kind of a starting point basically to indicate that there is an issue. And depending on the circumstances, we also have the property maintenance code that addresses a lot of these issues. So a lot of times, depending the section, it might start with the property maintenance code, where it would be or a call or an advisory notice or a notice of violation. So it not always it would kick in right into a nuisance.
But Steve, I think we need to address that, actually, what he's talking about, hey, giving an extension under the time for abatement appeals, which is the next section, because it says he has, he's got to write the ticket. It's got to be no less than 20 days unless it's grass, and it can be 5 days. And it says they must complete the service or the abatement. If they don't agree with the time, then they have to appeal it with the Board of Zoning Appeals, not to be filed later than 20 days following the service. It gives him, actually, we should, if we want him to have the ability to give an extension, we should write that in there somewhere, because this is saying if you have no other choice but to do it in the 20 days, or you have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, which I have a question. John, does it cost the resident money to file an appeal with the resident, the zoning?
Yeah, there's a $100 application fee.
I think that should be waived for any of this, because there's no way that if they think our zoning director's doing them dirty, they should have to pay $100 to try to get a board to find that
Do we
out.
incur $100 in expenses?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
What are the additional expenses?
Between the staff time, a variance
Wait
is
a second,
$100, an appeal is $150, plus the cost of notices.
What, aren't those?
That's not due process.
Aren't those people already being paid, though? The case law says it's got to be additional expenses, not, like, you're already being paid to be here or not, you're a salaried guy. It's not like I'm asking you to travel on a trip with me to San Francisco to go to a national convention and learn about stuff where you got new expenses. This is, they're already on staff, they're already doing what they're doing. This is the same problem I have when we send a bill with an ambulance. I'm like, you're on staff, you're being paid, we bought an ambulance for you to go help people, but now we're sending a bill like we're a private agency. I think it's a deterrent effect, which is.
I don't think
you wanna
100
The chilling,
challenge us.
yep.
I mean, I don't think
it's
an
dressed up
application
as-
fee is our variance application fee of $100 is
Well,
not,
for a variance is different to me. That's kind of like if you're asking for a variance, it's almost like you're applying for a permit for something, where this is a remedy for someone to challenge a decision the city's made that can affect them financially, that can affect them criminally. I don't think we should be charging them a fee to try to remedy it if they think we're in the wrong.
Unless it costs us. I'm trying to find out if it costs us. Do we have any, I don't mean that we're already paying your staff, we're already paying people to be there. Is there something you gotta go buy, or you gotta hire, or you gotta expend money on that you wouldn't already be expended, whether they filed an appeal or not? I don't think there is,
I
but
don't-
correct
yeah.
me if I'm wrong.
relative to an appeal, we have probably done, I think we've only done one appeal in all of my time at the city.
Yeah, I can't think of any expense you would have to spend.
I mean, when you bring up people are already getting paid.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, that's, you're paid to do a job, and part of your job is to deal with appeals. So that's not an extra expense that we can charge the residents for, because they decided to appeal. We can't charge them for your time to deal with the appeal. You already get paid, the taxpayers already pay you to do that with their tax money.
Okay.
So to charge an additional fee, but to me, it even goes more beyond that. It's a chilling effect. Hey, you want to fight us, you got to pay.
It is.
And this, we're talking about due process. That's not due process when you're charging someone to file that, you know. I just think we have to address that in here. I would like to see that fee completely waived for a nuisance violation appeal.
Yes, I agree.
I agree too. I would never have even known to ask that, so I'm glad.
Well, I was on the Board of Zoning Appeals,
Yeah, I'm
so
glad whoever brought that up.
I knew there was a fee. I just wanted to make it clear.
Yeah, thank you for that. I did not know that, and that needs to not apply here.
Okay, does your, back up to 53103, Andre, 1 through 5, do you feel like your current notices contain those 5 new items in them? Because that's where you're gonna run into a problem when you go to a magistrate in Portage County or something with a lawyer is, oh, you know, you didn't specifically identify the nature of the nuisance. Where's your order? Did you order the owner? You know, and if you don't meet one of these 5 things, did you advise the owner of their right to appeal? Did you advise them of the remedies? If you don't have it already, include all of that in specific detail in the written form so that it's a lot easier for the law department to just mark that document and hand it over to the magistrate and say, yeah, they were handed this and it covers those 5 things.
I introduced that when I got hired because part of Diane, I kind of like jumped on the wagon that was moving already. So all those notices were older notices. So then I had to redo all the notices to include all those processes and procedures and language. I even added extra language to guide the residents how to contact me, like if there are any specific circumstances, like how to ask for an extension, basically to encourage them to contact me and like start the conversation and not be afraid that the government, you know, is sending them scary notices, but to try to see how we can work together basically through the process.
How many, at least for our rental units and things like that, a lot of these companies are coming in and buying our older houses, like where me and Billy grew up. We would have to serve the owner of the company, but sometimes those are just LLCs. I'm worried we serve that company and then we just get a useless piece of paper. What, if anything, in the ordinance do we have to exercise the coercion that we want to get this behavior changed on the occupants? Does it apply equally to owners and occupants, or is it just to owners?
I believe it should fall on the owner.
Right, but then like, my dad's house went to a company, that
Perfect
there's
example.
nobody around, they're out of state.
Perfect example, Steve. The house on 303, where unfortunately a lady passed away. Okay, it was a rental. The owner had not been to look at that house for 2 years. Okay? there has to be some responsibility on the owner.
I agree.
To make sure that their property is kept up.
Can we do both, though? I'm saying, can't we do both?
It does stipulate both. It says that you will give to the owner and you'll give to the occupant.
So can we cite both? I'm saying I'd rather do both. That
don't
way
see why
somebody
not.
has to come to court.
I don't
Well, a
see
lot of
why
the
not.
notices say the owner, but I'm asking if it also includes the occupant.
It says that right on here. If the occupant is different than your owner, then the notice shall be served on both.
Yeah.
And the statute applies to both then. I just want to make sure, I'm with you on the owner. I just don't want to just serve the owner.
No, because the owner, then he could, he could come and make sure that his tenant, the owner should have a worry if his tenant isn't keeping up his property. That's a pretty
Look
significant
at,
investment.
look at the plaza, the parking lot with the guys in Texas. They could give a crap. And I'm just telling you, people are buying these houses up, they're not going to care if they're mowing it, they're not going to answer, they're not going to come do his zoning thing until, go ahead, man.
Why, if the occupant is not the owner, and the owner is supposed to take care of the property, why would you cite the occupant?
Because
they need to be notified.
Well, like they're supposed to mow their own grass.
Well, but that's what I'm saying though, but there could be a contract that the owner will take care of that.
Well, I don't,
between those
we don't want to get into
Yeah,
that, which is,
that's
I'm
between
saying
them.
cite them both is what I want to do, cite them both.
Yeah.
I'm saying notify the occupant, but why would you try to legally, that's the owner, if that's what the contract says.
Well-
If their contract says you will maintain it as an occupant,
I don't want to get into it, I'd rather cite them both.
But if we cite them both, then the owner or the occupant can then civilly deal with the owner saying, hey, he's supposed to be doing this, and the courts can find that owner or that occupant's not liable for the violation the owner
The
is.
city's goal is to abate the nuisance.
Yeah, we just
no
want to
matter
get rid
who
of
it
the
is.
nuisance.
We don't care who owns it. I'm just worried that if we hammer language owner, can we also go after the occupant when they end up being in Texas, like these parking lot guys who, it's been years and that.
The definition of owner does include a limited liability corporation.
Right, but I'm saying, as a practical standpoint,
They
he's
won't
like,
care.
I've never met him, I've never heard of him, I mailed it, they didn't sign for certified, so then I sent it regular. Whoop-de-doo, you got service and you'll get a judgment, but you're not gonna collect on anybody, and we're gonna end up paying to have it mowed, and we're paying to have that item drug off the property, which would probably be doing anyhow in most instances, but I don't know, I'd like to say both, because I think the more people we have that think they're in jeopardy, the faster the nuisance will probably get abated. And I think the people that live there have a responsibility. If you're living there, and
Absolutely.
it's probably your junk car.
There have been a couple of instances where the owner has received a citation notice or a notice of violation, and the tenant is no longer there once the situation has been addressed.
Serve
Because
the
it
owners,
was
I'm
not,
with you. Serve them, but I'm also like, serve the tenant too. I don't think it
doesn't hurt.
should hurt, yeah, it's not gonna hurt us.
Yeah, the magistrate indicated to us in case of Diane that we should serve any known party in relation to property. So whoever we know that.
Let's make sure our wording matches that, then that's all I was trying to point out. All right, down to the section, Justin, you were talking about, is there anything else in the bottom of page 3 that you wanted to talk about?
I just think putting wording in there that allows for, and maybe you specify reasons why they can have an extension, like, oh, I just didn't get to it, that's not, I was just out of the hospital, or I was, maybe there are some specific reasons why, so you don't get people just going, oh, they want an extension.
In looking at this, I'm sorry, go ahead, Justin.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
In looking at this list, 1 through 5, I think the notices of violation pretty much already address each one of these items. And if they don't, then the template for the notices of violation can be easily adjusted to do so.
Well, I'm just talking about giving Andre power to extend, because under the time for abatement, they only get 20 days, or
No less than 20 days.
30, but let's say they go to 30, and
Yeah.
it comes on day 31, and it's not abated, and she goes,
Yeah.
"Oh, I just got diagnosed with cancer, I've been in the hospital for 3 weeks, I couldn't get to it." He doesn't have an ability under this to say, you know what, I'll give you another 15 days or another 30 days. This, at that point, she has to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals to appeal it, to get an extension, or to appeal it, the violation itself. So I just want to give Andre some type of ability in extenuating circumstances where the homeowner legitimately didn't have the ability to get to it because of a medical issue or a death in the family, or something that would preclude them, that isn't within their control, the ability to address it without having to go jump through hoops. And I think if we give Andre the ability to grant an extension based on, extenuating circumstances, that would be appropriate.
That's a great point, Justin, because there are times when the zoning inspectors have issued citations to people, and it was so egregious that they couldn't get it done in 20 days. And they go out, they look, and they say, okay, how much progress has been made? And there were some people that were really trying, but like you said, number one, they might be old, okay? And they may not be able to do it.
They work full-time, and they can only do so much on their time
There
off.
might be monetary considerations for these folks to do it.
Yeah.
And so I agree, there should be some type of a qualifier in there that gives him the ability to extend, progress has been made.
He does that often.
Continued progress will enable, the person to continue cleaning up the property.
Yeah, he does it often, but this ordinance doesn't allow
With
it.
that?
Well, it does in 03, but not in 04. In 03, it says specify a reasonable time in which to abate the nuisance.
Right.
In 04 is where he doesn't have the extension
Well,
capability.
but he doesn't really have an 03, because this is giving the initial notice. He has to give them a reasonable amount of time.
What is that? John was just asking.
It's down here, it's at least 20 calendar days.
No less than 20.
No less than 20 calendar days.
That's to abate.
Except in the case of the tall grass or weeds, which can be as few as 5. And it also takes into account the nature and the extent of the violation. So if it's some huge mess like that was back over here that he knows it's going to take them 45 days just because there's no way you could get it done in 30 days, then he has the ability to give them that. That's reasonable based on the extent of the circumstance. However, if he goes back in 45 days and they've got 3/4 of it done and they're like, man, I need another week or two, we need to give him the ability to do that. This doesn't allow him to do that. This says once he's given that original time, whatever's on the thing, after that they have to appeal to the Board of Zoning Appeals and all that junk. So I would rather just let him have that ability.
So, go ahead. So Andre, if you go out and you see a huge mess, do you take that into account when you give the time of if it's normally 20 days, it says no less than, would you say, okay, this is a huge mess, I need to give these people longer?
Absolutely. And again, I guess we need to specify more in the language. I don't know if I would express myself correctly, but I'll try to avoid nuisance as much as possible, because it's not in a good practice for city to do the work for the people. Yeah. It's in a good practice to guide people through the code, for them to understand what's the minimum standards for the community. So then we can work with each owner, try to incrementally, have somehow a significant progress on the property to get there to meet compliance. And this would be kind of like a last resort to, like, if we exhausted all our options and we don't know what else to do, or the owner is just refusing. Like, I don't agree, I don't want it, I appealed, I lost the appeal, I still don't want it to do anything. So I work with everyone, doesn't matter if it's a zoning violation or a property maintenance violation, to understand their circumstances and then work from there. So I say if I get to a point where I have to send someone to court, in some way I feel like I didn't succeed to guide the person through the process to understand better that, it's important for everyone, for the community to, have minimum standards, because these are minimum standards, not trying to like beautify the neighborhood or anything like that.
All right. Top of page 4.
That's the end of section 3.
It's the very end, yeah.
The section C there, can we go through that real quick? The time to file an appeal and the time to abate the nuisance shall both commence on the date of service of the finding and order. However, the director may proceed to abate the nuisance with city forces if an appeal is not filed as of the compliance date. So that's saying you can use city forces to go abate if they don't get it done in those 20 days. I like the may there because it's not requiring him to do that because that may not be the appropriate thing. But the last part, an appeal is not rendered moot by such action. And I have a question about that. So if you've taken an action to abate the property, but it doesn't render the appeal moot, however, it says here
that's to protect themselves from, it's an M3, so they could get a fine in jail.
Well, I understand.
So you're like, hey, we fixed it, and we still want to throw you in jail.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, and still fine you. You can still file your appeal and win, have a magistrate say that wasn't a abatement, or Andre didn't follow your rules, and so that they throw out the conviction.
I think my point is that this is in complete contradiction to the previous sentence. However, the director may proceed to abate the nuisance with city forces if an appeal is not filed. So how can he can't abate it with city forces? So there would be no appeal to moot, right? That would be.
No, I think what they're saying. Imagine a fact pattern like what you're saying.
Yeah.
City goes in right away and fixes whatever it is. They abate it.
But they can't if they file an appeal.
Oh, if the appeal's not filed, but you could have a situation where the city goes in, they haven't filed their appeal yet.
They only have 20 days to file. They only have.
Right, but we could go in and fix it.
No, because we can't go in and fix the property until the compliance date, and they only have the time of.
Are they both 20?
To file the appeal.
Are they both 20 days?
Right. So.
The time to file the appeal and the time to abate the nuisance shall both commence on the date of service.
Yep.
So then you got your 20 days.
Yep.
But what if he gives an extension, another extension, another extension, another extension? And in that time, the city goes in and just cleans it out.
Well, if he's going to have extensions, they shouldn't be going in and cleaning out until it's over. That person's.
But I think they can. I think you can have a situation where he can go in and abate it. Say it's something dangerous, like
what's the point?
The road, we can't see to pull out in an intersection because a tree fell and they won't move.
Well, what's the point of giving them an extension if we're just going to go in and fix it? We just go in and fix it.
The last thing we want to do is dedicate our people to going in and cleaning.
Right, I think Justin's trying to clarify it, I think, that it's,
I
right.
just think these two.
No, that's the last thing we want to do is put our people in there. In fact, when we abated the property over here in Diane, we hired an outside person. Okay.
I just think these two sentences are in contradiction. You can't have an appeal.
Have Mr. Knott ask, who wrote this? Paul. Ask Paul what he meant by it. That'll help.
Yeah, because you can't have he can't abate a nuisance property if an appeal's
I'm
already
sure
been
Paul
filed.
had some appellate right in mind that he wrote this.
A due process.
Yeah, let's give Paul a chance for the next work session,
Okay.
just to get us an answer, and then we'll know. We'll have a better understanding.
Okay.
John, did you have a question for me?
The way I read this was that, kind of like what Steve said, if it's dangerous and the city goes out on day 5 and fixes the issue, would they still have
Well, the problem is
15 days
we can't go out on D5 and fix the issue. We have to wait until the compliance date.
Gotcha.
We're not. Nowhere in here gives us an early.
But if it's hazardous,
There's an
Emergency
emergency
stuff.
provision that you can.
Where's that at?
That was back in.
Closer at the end.
You gotta go to
Yeah.
Oh, we haven't gotten to it.
So even if the issue's fixed, they could still file an appeal?
Yeah, because
But if
I
I-
bet there's case law that says if the city just goes out there, bullies its way in and fixes it,
Yeah.
and then mails them a bill and fine, they can still appeal it, and any ordinance has to contain that in order for it to be due process. Otherwise, cities that want to just go and invade someone's property and be a Karen and take something down will run in, take it, get some judge to sign an order for them to do it real quick, and say, it's moot, we fixed it, you can't even challenge us. And the court's like, no, they can still appeal and find what you did was wrong.
It would have to go pretty far down the road for us to put boots on the
Yeah,
ground.
ask
That's
Paul,
it.
I bet there's.
I mean, unless it was something dangerous per se, and like you guys just said, they're still gonna get to 20 days. And in that period of time, we're gonna be having a lot of conversation with John C. and myself. We're gonna put eyes on it.
If 53107 is the emergency provision, you can go in immediately if it's declared.
Yeah, page 8.
That's the one, I think that's the one situation where you would still want to exercise your right to appeal.
You still only have 20 days to appeal, though.
Yeah.
That could be a situation where a tree falls on someone's house and they refuse to take the tree out. Well, I guess that would still be their up to them. Who cares if they're gonna live in there, you know?
Well, what if it's blocking some?
What if blocking a road?
It would be something falling on the road, falling
Yeah.
on the sidewalk, some of that.
Some kind of hazardous contaminant.
Yeah.
To the entire city, not just,
And we would only go to the extent of removing the danger.
Right.
Yeah, if it was in the right of way and that.
I guess you're right. If we happen to have an
Just in
emergency
the clean
situation,
version.
and would we bill them then? Obviously, then they would appeal it.
So as far as I understood from Paul, and Paul will clarify more, it can happen where we might have an emergency and we'll have to do it, and we might even lose the appeal process, but our focus is to protect the public. So we might have to, it might happen that we might do the work and then never send the bill, or might send the bill, lose the appeal process and never charge them. But it's, yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of the emergency.
All right, 53105, I have a question for Paul when he wrote this. I'm thinking in conjunction with 531.99, 99, whenever you look at a piece of legislation, if it's section .99, that's almost always your penalty section. 53105 used to have a bunch of like civil remedies for recouping costs and expenses. If we had to go out and do it, clear litter ourselves. There's a section D, E, and F. Those are all removed, and we're left with just a one long sentence that says, unless specified herein, I'm at 53105. Unless specified herein, a finding of public nuisance shall expire upon abatement of the nuisance or decision of the board or a court of proper jurisdiction terminating the finding. I'm just curious, in conjunction with 99, a violation of this is a misdemeanor of the third degree. So you got a small fine, a possibility of a little bit of jail. Where or what are we contemplating in regards to any civil remedies, Mr. Knott asked him? Recoupment of, suppose we do have, it's an emergency spill. They stored some noxious material and we find it's all over their property and we had to pay to clean it. What remedies does he have in mind for us to collect on that? And it's not necessary to have a civil restitution type remedy in 99 or 53105.
It's in 531.
it's in 5, yeah, right.
Oh, E?
Yeah. After all opportunity for.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Very good, never mind. Don't ask him that, my bad. I can't catch everything, Justin. Very good. So we have that ability to go in and collect if we need to. All right, the 53106. Every owner of a parcel of land shall maintain the land or cause such land made free of nuisance. Owner, see, I'm seeing owner. Can we add some occupant, resident, renter language to that, or?
Occupant, owner/occupant would be.
Yeah, I'm just worried.
Yeah, we've been working for almost a year on draft property maintenance regulations, and I know Paul spent a lot of time on the definition of owner, and I want to say it does include owner, occupant, tenant, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
So we'll,
we did go over that. I should have looked at that. Owner means the person, corporation, partnership, limited liability company, or other entity identified on the tax document. So no, yeah, it doesn't include the actual people that live there. So
Defined it otherwise.
ask him if we can do that, because I just see us where we have these outside corporations serving somebody who doesn't care.
Yep.
And then we end up going in and doing it ourselves, and then we never collect from anybody, and we end up in a place, I'd cite them all.
It costs them less to pay for a third-degree misdemeanor than it does to hire a damn attorney.
Fix it,
You
right.
guys cost too much money.
So that's why I say add the person that's living there, or talk to Paul and see if we could add that, if there's any sort of impediment to that he knows in the law. Oh, item C, where a nuisance involves abandoned or junk motor vehicles, and then it says comma, again, same question, then it says RVs, motorcycles, mini trucks, abatement. What does chapter 304 say about that, and how does that interplay with 531? I haven't read 304.
That's junk motor vehicles and abandoned motor vehicles, and there are a lot of definitions, and
We're only referring to junk stuff,
so we need to just reference this section properly.
and clearly define that it's junk, right?
And the junk motor vehicles is defined as any motor vehicle that is partially dismantled or wrecked and cannot safely or legally be operated on a public highway.
If I'm reading this as a citizen, I might think, well, they say abandoned or junk motor vehicles, comma, and then they just say regular old recreational vehicles, regular old
Yeah,
motorcycles,
there's gonna be some,
regular old,
taken away from
you
there.
know what I mean? Like, can't we just put junk in front of everything, every word? Junk recreational vehicles,
Junk, junk,
motorcycles, junk mini trucks.
Yeah, we can do
Otherwise,
that.
I'm gonna be like, I can't have my RV, I can't have my motorcycle, I can't have my mini truck. What is a mini truck?
what is what?
A mini truck.
Haven't you ever seen them little tiny trucks from like Korea?
With
They're
midgets
about
in
as
them?
big as this table?
I don't even know what a mini truck is.
Yeah,
No, I don't know what that is.
Are they like a big problem in cities or something?
I don't know.
We don't have boats.
Maybe it was just included in the description.
We don't have boats on here, but we have mini trucks. I didn't know we had a mini truck problem.
Can you just put a colon after junk, where a nuisance involves
I'd
abandoned
rather
or
say
junk?
junk.
Yeah.
I agree with Mr. Mishniak. I think that we need some better wording on
'Cause
that.
I'm nervous if I'm reading that section. I'm thinking they're coming after my RV.
They're going after you.
I don't have an RV though.
Hey, we made it in a new command center, you know?
All right, I'll tell you what, since it's a work session, we're gonna do more. It's 8 o'clock. And I wanted to stick to the schedule, 6 to 8, not, like, I'm already losing my own train of thought because it's 2 hours of reading and it's boring. If there's not an objection, can we wrap up for now and schedule a new one? Anything you want to add, you guys?
I have some announcements when you're
I
done.
would say if they can start compiling some of these changes or thoughts for the next work session, not necessarily a finished document, but maybe some of their thoughts on how they want to reword stuff, and
Sure.
bring it back to us. And
Yeah, and can we make that available to the public too, so that they can join in?
yeah.
I just really appreciate the input that you guys had. I mean, this is a work in progress. I mean, we knew that the first one was not gonna get passed through. And I really do, and I'm sure that John, Andre, and Billy do too.
We appreciate
You know,
all the hard
there's
work
some
you
valid
guys.
stuff in there, so.
We appreciate the work you guys are putting into it. I mean, I'm sure the residents do too. Okay, we'll just schedule at the next service committee.
Okay.
So why don't you just take over and we'll be done.
All right. Announcements, City Hall will be closed on Wednesday, June 19th.
Yes.
2024 for Juneteenth. Meeting packets will be distributed the next day. There will be a public hearing, Tax Budget Finance Committee, regular council meeting on Monday, June 24th, 2024, starting at 7 PM.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
The council favors.
We are adjourned.
Not fast enough.
Nice.
Justin, you never left.
Bye, guys. Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. I'll figure it out.
to